Episode number 211 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. My guest today is Jennifer Edmonds. Jennifer teaches yoga, Pilates, and meditation, but specializes in fertility yoga and supporting women's journey to motherhood. After years of fertility struggles, failed IVF cycles, and a miscarriage, Jennifer eventually got pregnant naturally. Jennifer believes that the practices of yoga and meditation played an important role in her conception, and she loves being able to share this knowledge with others. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. So welcome to the podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's really exciting to speak with you.
So I love that you teach yoga because I'll tell you, like for me personally, yoga has changed my life and it truly connects you to a level like mentally too. People think it's just physical. It's way more than that. So I would love for you to share your background and how your journey got you inspired to do the work that you do today.
Sure. Gosh, how much time do you have? No,
It's always that big question.
I'll go through the brief version. So I actually started teaching Pilates in about 2009. So that was quite a while ago now. And I loved it. And I fell into working with pre and postnatal women because the studio that I worked at in Sydney specialized in pre-birth and postnatal recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed that. It was a huge part of my life, and getting to watch women go through this beautiful stage of their life too was really eye-opening. And when it came time to start a family of my own, I guess, like so many of us, didn't realize how difficult it could be for so many people. And Pilates just really didn't have a lot to offer me on my fertility journey. It's a wonderful technical practice, but there is something about yoga that just goes a little bit more deeper. And
Mm-hmm.
I was recommended at the time, a friend of mine said, "Oh, you should start practicing yoga. It's so good for helping you clear your mind and get your headspace while you're dealing with the fertility struggles."
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. You know what it's like with women who are trying to fall pregnant, they'll try anything.
Yes.
So I started practicing yoga. And like you said, it changed my life. It really did. And after many years of fertility struggles and IVF and miscarriage, I ended up falling pregnant naturally in the end. And I really owe a huge part of that to yoga. I truly believe it got me through my journey, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. And when this happened, I realized how magical it was and that I wanted to learn more. So I went back and I retrained as a yoga teacher. And of course, then I'm specialized in fertility and hormonal balance yoga, as well as pre and postnatal. So I've been teaching that for a few years now as well. And I decided to make that more my specialty because there just isn't a lot for women in the fertility space in terms of
Mm-hmm.
exercise. Plenty for pre and postnatal women.
True.
But when it comes to, fertility struggles, and especially when you start going down the IVF route, exercise is a big gray area, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to find someone to guide you through what you should be doing. So that's what I do now, and I love it.
That's awesome. And when you were doing this, you also incorporated meditation, or do you incorporate meditation into the practice?
Absolutely. I always incorporate some meditation either at the beginning or the end or both of the practices that I teach, as well as a lot of breath work, practicing all of the beautiful pranayama techniques that yoga has to offer is enormously beneficial as well. So, I mean, I suppose it's all yoga when you look
Mm-hmm.
at what the teachings of yoga are, but yes, we incorporate both meditation and the yogic practices and the breath work.
And then you mentioned something interesting that I don't hear much is hormonal yoga. Can you
Mm.
specify a little more, or like describe that?
Sure. So there are lots of hormonal imbalances that women experience, whether they're fertility related or not, although a lot of them are, such as PCOS, thyroid issues, from low AMH, high FSH, all of these things, whilst yoga isn't a quick fix, it can help to balance out a lot of the symptoms that hormonal imbalances create in the body. And I find that over a few weeks or a few months of committed practice, things can really start to look a lot different. I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism at the later stage of my fertility journey, and I no longer take medication anymore. And I just make sure I keep going with my yoga practice, and it really has kept it at bay. It's amazing.
It is amazing. It truly is amazing. So describe the differences between fertility and hormone balancing yoga versus just regular yoga. So because people hear different types of yoga, but they can't really picture what it is and what it targets, because sometimes I know that it's per like cycle, the different phases of the cycle, or does it have more blood flow for the pelvis or pelvic floor?
Well, when we're talking about fertility yoga, it's not like we're doing any fancy or new exercises, but the way that we practice it is really specific. So, especially if you are trying naturally, we need to work the yoga practice around the four phases of the menstrual cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, just from this, we find things like PMS starts to disappear,
Mm-hmm.
the big differences of one day feeling energetic, the next day feeling really lethargic start to balance out, and really working with what your body needs both hormonally and emotionally at each stage of the menstrual cycle is really beneficial. So for example, during menstruation we take the exercises really gently.
Mm-hmm.
As we then move towards the follicular stage and ovulation, we start building up some energy and heat in the body and making the practices a little more energetic. And then after ovulation, as we're into that 2 week wait period, we really want to start focusing on calming the nervous system, getting the body balanced, and preparing for potential pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we generally tend to work it around fertility work. With hormonal balance yoga, similarly, we are still working with the menstrual cycle if the woman is menstruating,
Mm-hmm.
but it really depends on their condition as well. So, for example, with thyroid conditions, we want to try and stimulate and nourish the thyroid gland, which is obviously at the neck. So, we do lots of poses and lots of exercises that focus on bringing blood flow to this area, placing gentle pressure around the neck, but then releasing it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, depending on what other symptoms or what other issues people present with, we can work the practices around that as well. I do also find, though, that even if they're not trying to fall pregnant, it's still very beneficial to work yogic exercises around the stages of the menstrual cycle because it is just the best way to keep hormones balanced overall.
Yes, absolutely. That's a key thing because everybody can benefit from it. When we see people in Chinese
Yes.
medicine, when we see patients for the first time, regardless of where they're at or if they're trying or not trying, we always ask information about the menstrual cycle because it just tells you so much. And I think to myself also with what you do, what yoga really does is similar to Qigong. It's kind of cousins in a way.
Mm.
That's how like I see Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, where
Yeah.
it really moves the chi. It really gets a flow in the body. And that is
Mm.
where vitality happens. And that's where you can feel more liberated emotionally as well. And a lot of people
Absolutely.
talk about having these really incredible moments when they're doing yoga of release, like emotional
Mm.
release. They just say like it's so weird. And I have that also with acupuncture. Like I don't know what happened, but I just got this I just wanted to cry. And it just kind of opens up something where something that was pent up or like an emotional trauma or something that was like held in, because we hold it in our body, gets
Yeah.
released. And then after that release, they start to feel profound effects and
Mm.
changes in their body and mind.
Absolutely. I notice this a lot, especially when I'm working one on one with a student. And I suppose when you are working that closely with someone, they have that sense of trust and
Yes.
that sense that they can let go with you. I especially find that this is true when we're doing release work around the hips. And we tend to hold a lot of stored trauma and tension around our hips and especially around the psoas, which is the the biggest muscle at the front of the hip. So when you release these areas, it really does create that emotional release for people.
Yeah.
And for some of them, yeah, it's just what they needed to let go of in order to move on with their life or whatever stage they're at in their healing journey.
Well, if you think about it, around the hips, that whole area, that's our first chakra, first and second, it's definitely connected, it's neighboring. And that area is safety. A lot of times with trauma, you're going to feel that area gets tighter because it feels like it needs to clench onto a feeling of safety because it's usually with any kind of trauma, you don't feel safe.
Definitely. I think it always comes back to feeling safe when we're talking
Mhm.
about trauma and regulating our nervous systems. And yoga really does provide that beautiful combination of bringing you into that present moment with your body. You feel your hands on the mat, you feel your sit bones beneath you. It really does bring you into a place where your brain says, oh, I feel safe. So when we
Yes.
start doing these release exercises, it becomes a really beautiful way to let go of that trauma.
Yeah, without a doubt. And how did you feel throughout this? Did you have any kind of like aha, during your whole process of doing yoga? Like what was your experience like through
Um,
that process?
where do I start with that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
I think it was at the very beginning of 2020, just before COVID happened. I was going through my last round of IVF, and I ended up with two embryos from that round, and both of the transfers were unsuccessful. And the day after the last transfer hadn't been successful, we went into lockdown. So all the clinics were closed. Even if I had wanted to start IVF again, I just didn't have the option. So, like most people in the world, we were stuck at home. I had really nothing else to do. My studio was closed. I wasn't teaching, but I could practice yoga every day. And it really was the one thing that got me through it. And I had many moments of just being reminded that I could trust myself and my body. And when you go through something like IVF and it doesn't work, especially after, gosh, a long fertility journey before that, you really do lose confidence in your body's abilities. But there is something magical about yoga's ability to reconnect you with what you're capable of. So I had many moments of finding that beautiful moment of peace and that moment of clarity. And anyone who's had a really good yoga session or, even a wonderful acupuncture session or any of these really beautiful alternative therapies, you have this one moment where you go, everything's okay. I'm
Hmm.
going to be okay. I am completely capable of getting through this journey. And you realize that you don't need anything else. It's such a cliche. You hear it all the time. Everything that you need is already within you, all these sorts of things that people say to you. But
Right.
as cliched as that might be, it really is true. And I think that sometimes a practice like yoga can show that to you. Certainly did for me.
It's interesting because I find that when you're doing something like yoga, and it's really an experience where you're moving through emotions that, again, we hold in our bodies. So it's experiential. But what's interesting is through doing that, you almost open yourself up to a level of trust. Because I feel like
Mm,
that trust is where the healing happens.
definitely. That feeling of not just trusting your body, but also trusting your path and your journey and your place in the world, which is extremely difficult to do when you're struggling to have a
It's
family.
very difficult to do.
Yeah, it is. But there was something, I'm not particularly religious, but there was something about yoga that really showed me that I could trust in something bigger than myself.
Hmm. It's amazing. And it's
Yeah.
called yoke. I mean, it translates as
Yeah.
yoke.
Yeah, exactly.
And the yoke is connecting mind and spirit,
Everything
or
and
body and spirit, right? Body and spirit.
connecting body and spirit, or mind and spirit. I suppose it's all
Yeah.
connected.
Right.
Yeah, but not just to the body and spirit of your own sort of making, but really trusting that there is something greater guiding us and being able to work through these difficult journeys like infertility. really can show you what a better life is possible on the other side when you trust in those experiences.
So after COVID and then the lockdowns, you had a good amount of time to really do yoga. And was that when everything shifted, changed?
Yes, it definitely was. It was the hardest and best year of my life, I suppose. I
Mhm.
So that's when I really got into yoga. And yeah, I think a lot of people who practice Pilates frequently will say that they just don't get yoga. And that was
Mhm.
definitely me until I was really put in a place where I needed something to help guide me. And it ended up being yoga that really showed me through that difficult time. So, whilst we're in lockdown and obviously we didn't have the opportunity to go through fertility treatments, I was practicing yoga every day. And some days that might have just looked like laying in a restorative pose for 20 minutes, listening to some music with some essential oils diffusing. Yoga doesn't always have to be the energetic flows that we see on
Mhm.
Instagram, right?
Right.
But I was practicing every day. And 3 months into lockdown and 2020 restrictions, I fell pregnant naturally for the very first time. And it had been many, many years of my journey that we'd been trying to fall pregnant. So this was a huge revelation for me. Sadly, we lost that baby at
Oh,
eight
I'm sorry
weeks,
to hear that.
but thank you. But there was just something playing at the back of my mind. I just thought, as hard as this time is, I feel like there's hope. There's something that I've discovered here that I need to learn more about. And that's when I did all of my training. I started with my 500-hour yoga teacher training qualification and then went and specialized in all of the other things from that. And then the very last month of 2020, I fell pregnant again. And my little boy is now 15 months old and very healthy. And I still continue to practice yoga every day. And that's when I decided to really make it my focus and start teaching women what was possible.
Hmm.
And of course, since then, I've been lucky to work with so many women that both teach fertility yoga and those who have been practicing it themselves. And like I said before, it's no quick fix to fertility troubles, but it does make an enormous difference. And I have seen some really amazing things as a result. Not just myself, when doctors told me that it was never going to happen naturally and IVF was our only option, I've seen so many women in a similar situation, but
Hmm.
they've been able to overcome all of that as well. And I think in a large part, yoga has shown them what has been possible.
Absolutely. And there's so many, obviously, so many different ways, but I feel like yoga helps with anything you choose to do, whether it's IVF
Mm.
or natural, whatever path you choose to do. I just feel like it really takes the edge off. It brings you more to your center. I feel like it also helps your intuition to guide you
Oh,
because you need
yes.
that so much when you're going through the process.
Definitely. I can't speak to that enough. And even when fertility clinics had reopened and my doctor got in touch with me and said, listen, if you would like to pursue further treatments, we're available now. But that part of me, that intuition just was saying, this isn't the way.
Yeah.
And being able to trust that
Yeah.
is the biggest gift,
It
whether I
really
feel
is.
pregnant alone or not. Yeah, it was incredible. So that's what I try to inspire my students to find in their own journeys as well.
Yeah, and I really do believe that we experience our intuition through our bodies, just like we do emotions.
Mm.
You feel it
Mm.
physically. Like there's this visceral feeling inside your body that tells you, like, because your body is not going to like think twice, three times, four times until it convinces itself out. It doesn't do that. You do that. So
True,
when you get in touch,
true.
when you get into that yoke, that connection with your body,
Hmm.
then you really create a bond of listening where you can't
Mm.
ignore it. If you're listening to your body, then you're listening to your body. There's no second guessing because you can feel it. And that's why I feel
Isn't
like
that
it
so true?
really connects you. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you start to get into that habit of, say, someone suggests something, in your career or in your personal life, and you hesitate for a moment and you say, is this really what I want? And just taking a moment to listen to that intuition and listen to what your body's response is, it never gets it wrong.
No. And it's
So
so
true.
funny because every one of us has had a moment, at least one moment. I'm sure many, many moments. I have had many moments where I was like, I knew it. I should have listened to myself, whatever it was. And sometimes it's like stupid things, but it's like, I knew better. I just knew it. And
Yeah,
I kicked myself after because I'm like, I knew it. And I just ignored myself. And I'm like, I can
so
remember
true.
the moment that I knew what to do and I ignored it.
Yeah, it's like when you took an exam in high school and you write down your answer and then you go, oh, no, 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 that wasn't it.
Right.
And you
Right.
change it. And it was
Yep.
always the
Yep.
first response,
Yep.
wasn't it?
Totally.
So true.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any guidance or tips for people listening on how they can at first start? Maybe they don't have a practice. How can they ease into having that connection with their bodies?
Well, if they've never had a yoga practice before, I just want to reassure them that especially fertility yoga, it is a practice for everybody. It
Mm-hmm.
is not the kind of yoga that you see on Instagram or where
That
people are
makes it
doing
impossible.
crazy. Yeah, and that is absolutely not the yoga that we practice when we're trying to work through a fertility journey. So my advice would be to find a teacher that you connect with. I really feel like yoga is all about the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not that's online or somewhere within their local area, the beautiful thing that COVID showed us was that we really can do a lot of our life online. And I
Mm-hmm.
was very skeptical myself before COVID happened. All of my students were, oh, please, can we do online sessions? I want to continue. And I was like, oh, it's not going to work. But it did. It worked beautifully. So
It's
if
all about
someone feels more
intention, right?
comfortable, exactly, always comes back to that intention.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone feels more comfortable practicing in their home, and especially with fertility yoga, you don't want to be going out and sharing your journey with other people in the class or just being looked at. I know exactly how it is. So if that is something that you want to practice, then doing it online is a really good way to get started. There are lots of resources that you can find online. I have a YouTube channel, which is a really easy way to get started and kind of dip your toe in, I suppose, is a way to put it, see if they like the practice. And then you can work more closely one-on-one or perhaps dive into a more specific yoga course that's available.
And if people want to work specifically with you, how can they find you?
Sure. So I have a website, which is elementspilatesyoga.com. And there you can find a list of all of the different ways that we can work together. I offer courses for fertility yoga as well as one-on-one sessions. And I also have an Instagram and TikTok account, which is jen.elementpilatesyoga. And you can always contact me directly on either of those platforms as well.
Awesome. Well, I do have all the links that you mentioned, and they can also be found at elementspilatesyoga.com as well. But I have all the website and social media links on the episode notes if anybody wants to go ahead and look there. And Jen, this was a great conversation, such an important topic and so needed out there. And I thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all your wisdom.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's been an honor.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.